you have to go back to the league's founding 30 years ago when, ever since then, this has been a league where larger cultural conversations, kind of flashpoint issues, are being attached to the league.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Basugin. So today on the show, we are talking about what's going down at the WNBA and how there is a culture war that is playing out there with a debate around trans athletes in women's sports and how people from inside and outside the sport are using kind of the growth and popularity of the WNBA to play this debate out. Plus, the late Senator Lindsey Graham's sister, Darline Graham, has won her primary in the state of South Carolina. Did the president's endorsement get her over the finish line? And if so, will that endure through November when the midterm elections happen? Up first, though, so we have this historic settlement in these ongoing social media addiction lawsuits. Meta, which is the owner of Facebook and Instagram, they have agreed to pay up to $18 billion to settle a lawsuit brought by dozens of states over claims that the company intentionally designed its platforms to be addictive to kids and teenagers. Now, Meta is settling, but it is not admitting guilt and continuing to deny those allegations. As part of this deal, Meta has also agreed to make a bunch of changes to its platforms, including establishing time limits for teens. But this is just one of the thousands of lawsuits brought against social media companies. So will this settlement lead to real change? For this, I want to bring in NBC News tech reporter, David Ingram. Hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So Meta's settlement came in the middle of this landmark trial where dozens of states were suing Meta. The head of Instagram just testified on Tuesday. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was about to testify as well. Catch us up to speed on this case and how we got to this moment and this settlement.
Right. So this is really the latest in a series of high-profile trials where Meta has faced some of its harshest critics. We've seen previous trials involving social media users in school districts, angry parents, and this was a trial brought by states that argued that Meta had illegally collected and used kids' data, and that these products were both addictive in a way, but it also had negative impacts on the state generally, including on the mental health of kids. And this trial was just right in the middle. It started last week. So this settlement ends all the litigation involving the states, and there is still some litigation involving other parties, but this is a big closure for this piece of litigation, at least.
So Meta's now going to pay nearly $18 billion to settle this lawsuit. In a statement, the company said that the payment, quote, can be used to fund youth online safety initiatives, among other state priorities. That, by the way, is just a fraction of what they were actually seeking in this thing. But Meta also has agreed to make some significant changes to the app. Explain the details of this deal, because I believe at least $5 billion or so is contingent on some other things.
Yeah, this is it's structured in a very interesting way. So first, I'll talk about the money. So states are getting, in some cases, billions of dollars each. California is expecting somewhere around $2 billion. And how exactly will be used will be determined later by the state legislature and the governor of each state. And but it's limited and it's supposed to be directed toward things that affect mental health for teens and related subjects. But then there are also all these other separate behavioral provisions of the settlement that would affect the way that Meta does business. So, for example, limiting notifications overnight and during the school day automatically for teen accounts, giving teens the ability to have a non-algorithmic feed so that the feed isn't designed to keep them scrolling, banning view counts and like counts for posts from teens. The list goes on. It's actually quite an extensive list of changes to Instagram and other Meta apps that would radically change, in some cases, how teens interact with social media. This, of course, is happening while Meta is trying to fight off proposed social media bans that is in place in Australia, the U.S., and some lawmakers have proposed a ban. This stops short of a ban, of course, and these are voluntary changes as part of the settlement. And then I'll add a third piece of this settlement, which is that it varies somewhat depending on whether other tech companies sign similar settlement agreements. So we're looking at TikTok and YouTube. They would potentially join this as well and pay additional money and affect the terms. So there are incentives for the states and for those companies to also come to an agreement to increase the size of the settlement and also to increase the changes, longer hours for blackout periods for notifications, for example, if other companies join this settlement.
How effective could some of these measures be for teenage users?
Limits on social media aren't very effective if they're voluntary. So Instagram, made teen accounts voluntary at some point and saw very little uptake, along with screen time limits. Those are not very effective. But these are not going to be opt-in. These are going to be top-down limits imposed by Meta as part of the settlement.
Are the states, the plaintiffs, are they saying this is enough? Some of these measures that are being taken and the nearly $18 billion?
For the most part, yes. The state of California released a statement saying that these were historic changes, and some of the advocates that have been most critical of Meta and other tech companies are hailing this as a historic agreement.
So Meta's now calling on YouTube and TikTok. They're looking at them and saying, okay, you guys need to implement the same measures that we are. Could this potentially motivate them, considering, the potential litigation that could lie ahead?
Yeah, I think when we think about social media, Meta comes first to mind because they're so big, and they have so many apps: Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. But kids are spending as much time, if not more, on YouTube, and in some cases TikTok. Meta does feel like they're being singled out here. And some of those companies have also faced lawsuits, including from teens and from parents, and they've settled some of those cases as well. So the question is, do they want to join Meta in this state government settlement and make it a truly sort of universal settlement?
What comes next here? I mean, it feels as if with these new rules potentially being implemented with this settlement, Meta then looking and pointing at TikTok and YouTube and Snap as well to implement similar measures. You're looking overseas at the UK and Australia with their restrictions on the use of social media for teenagers. Does it seem as if we are headed in that direction as well? Because teenage users oftentimes find their way around these measures that are put in place to protect them.
They do. And, I think a real question here is whether Meta lives up to the commitments that it's making in this settlement. So one of the interesting provisions in this settlement is Meta has to give teens an easier way to report bad things they're seeing on Instagram and Facebook. And it has to respond, I believe it's to 90% of those complaints within 6 hours. This is in some ways an existential threat to Meta and Instagram, Facebook, because they, for decades now, when they have looked at the growth of Instagram and Facebook, they look to young people. What do we need to do to attract the next generation of Instagram users and to keep them off competitors like Snapchat or TikTok? And their business model has depended on staying hip with the kids, and that's partly why they think they've resisted this kind of change. But they're hoping that this leads to some kind of longer term peace, which allows teens to keep using Instagram in a limited way without a total ban.
David Ingram, you're showing your age by saying hip to the kids.
It's true. I was hip once.
David Ingram, thank you.
My pleasure.
So throughout this primary season, we have been talking about the Trump effect and how much sway the president's endorsement has had in GOP primaries. So on Tuesday, the Trump effect faced its biggest test. Senator Darline Graham, sister of the late Senator Lindsey Graham, won South Carolina's Republican Senate primary runoff, and the president's backing was a key factor.
Mr. President, Lindsey truly loved you and viewed you as one of his closest friends. I appreciate that bond and appreciate all that you've done for our country. Our victory would not have been possible without you, and we are truly grateful. South Carolina is truly Trump country.
But Graham's path to the primary was pretty rocky, to say the least. So how was she able to pull off this win? And how much will President Trump's endorsement help her and other candidates heading into the general in November? So for this, I want to bring in NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, who just got back from South Carolina. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, yes.
So Darline Graham, she got over half of the GOP votes, 52% to be exact, to defeat her opponent, Congressman Ralph Norman. How did she get over the finish line here?
Listen, it begins and ends with Donald Trump. And I don't know if Donald Trump had decided not to get involved in this, if she would be the next senator from South Carolina, or at least on track to be the long-term next senator from South Carolina. There were a lot of questions about Darline Graham's capacity to be a United States senator, her experience to be a United States senator. There was a lot of concerns about the nepotism angle of it, that she was just being handed this seat because she was her brother's sister. But Donald Trump erased all of that for her. And this despite, which I think may have been one of the worst debate performances in the history of U.S. Senate races in recent memory. She was able to overcome all of that. And I do not think that you can underplay the role that Donald Trump played. He did more for Darline Graham than he's done for any Republican primary candidate. He flew to South Carolina on the Friday before the election, held a rally for her with more than 5,000 people in Myrtle Beach, which is the most populous part of the state. He then had his political arm, MAGA Inc., invest $800,000 in the last weekend of the campaign with text push alerts and all these different things to basically motivate his supporters to get to the polls. And there's no doubt that that was the difference between her winning and losing. I mean, at the end of the day, she won what I would describe as comfortably, but it certainly wasn't a blowout. It was a close race. And you have to believe that it was Donald Trump's final push that got her over the finish line.
Let's talk about the lack of understanding of some of these big issues and that debate in which Darline Graham said some pretty kind of shocking, interesting political comments.
I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not on national security. I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military. My brother was in the Air Force for 33 years. So I will do everything I can to support the military.
You have gone down to South Carolina. I just said you came back from there, but you've been down there now several times in this run-up. What were conservative voters telling you down there about Darline Graham?
I mean, it was the number one concern that voters had. So I was there 2 weeks ago before the first round of primary voting. This was before President Trump fully got in the race. This was before there'd been a debate of any kind. And there were already questions about her lack of experience. And then you had those questions about the lack of experience then lead into this, very, very rocky debate performance where her lack of experience, her lack of understanding of these big issues was full on display. And then Trump had to come in afterwards and rescue her with that rally on Friday. And the line that she had that got played over and over again at the Trump rally was, if anything, the debate performance showed that I'm not a politician. I talked to voters this week and they brought that up unprompted without me asking. I like the fact that she's not a politician. I think Washington's a problem. And what Ralph Norman's pitch is that you know who I am. I've cast all these votes. I'm a conservative. I've been a conservative since the first day you elected me. And a lot of the voters I talked to were like, that's not a good thing. And then the other thing that her comms team did really well that she was able to pick up the ball with and run with was painting Ralph Norman as part of the problem. She was like, he's been there for 20 years. Tell me what he's accomplished. His entire career has been one of obstruction. And she used a line which I've heard politicians use over and over again when running against incumbents. And that is The only thing he's ever accomplished is naming a post office. It's such a perfect way to nail somebody who doesn't have a lengthy legislative record. And Ralph Norman is not a guy that gets things done. Ralph Norman is a guy that stands in the way of getting things done. He's kind of proud of that. That's not me knocking him. There's two types of politicians that go to Washington, and he is in that latter class. So, they found a way to craft a narrative of her short time in the Senate, that she confirmed Todd Blanche, that she got the Russia sanctions bill done, which candidly, both of those things were on the verge of being done before she was sworn in, but she was part of the final passage. And so those were two things that she could point to. So yes, 100%. Being able to spin that bad debate performance into I'm a fresh face, that I think was a big key for her this week.
Yeah, and a lot of voters picking up and running with that. Let's talk Oklahoma for a moment, because there was a GOP runoff yesterday for governor there. President Trump's pick there, former state senator Mike Mazzei, squeaked through by just around 2,000 votes. Why was the race so close there, despite the president's endorsement?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is another example of, President Trump getting involved in something that he didn't necessarily have to get involved in. Gettner Drummond, who's the attorney general there, Mike Mazzei, the state senator. Their political voting record is as Republican as you can get. They're both very conservative. That was a personal thing for President Trump. He was annoyed that Gettner Drummond got in the way of a project that Trump thought was important. And that he made it kind of his personal mission to destroy his political life. But I do think it demonstrates that there is some leakage within that Trump coalition. And there are Republican voters that are feeling a little squirrely, willing to step outside the bounds of Donald Trump, even in a Republican primary. And even though make no mistake about this was a good night for Donald Trump. But if you're looking at in the grand scheme of things, these are just Republican primaries.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump needs a passionate Republican base to get out to the polls in November. If he's showing signs of leakage in these Republican primaries where he's not dominating, where his candidates aren't winning 80% of the vote,
right,
that could be a sign of weakness heading into November. Now, it's not going to matter in Oklahoma. It's not going to matter in South Carolina. It's probably not going to matter in a place like Florida, but it's definitely going to matter in a place like Texas. It's definitely going to matter in a place like North Carolina. So I think that's, at least one interpretation of what we saw play out there in Oklahoma.
Ryan Nobles, thank you.
Thank you, Yaz.
So a situation that has been brewing this season in the WNBA came to a head at an Indiana Fever Chicago Sky game Sunday night. Former NBA player Enes Kanter Freedom was in the stands wearing a T-shirt that said, quote, "Woman, noun, adult, human, female." So he got into this back and forth with Chicago player Natasha Cloud, and then Kanter took a step onto the court.
That is Enes Kanter in the building today. And he has voiced how he's felt about the situation. Natasha Cloud voicing her opinion as well. Kanter was just escorted out.
This is part of this ongoing debate around transgender athletes in women's sports, and it's taken center stage at the WNBA this season, and it's taken a lot of attention away from the games themselves. But why is this conversation even happening at the WNBA? And how is the league actually responding? For more on this, I spoke with NBC News sports reporter Andrew Greif.
Hello.
So I know this debate kind of got supercharged right by this interview with Indiana guard Sophie Cunningham. She did this interview with ESPN last month. Briefly, if you can, take us through the timeline of what has happened this season to make this such a huge issue inside the WNBA.
It really started with that interview before the season even began, but it's a long feature story, a profile of Sophie Cunningham, who has really become one of the most, I think, well-known players in the league, despite entering it not as a superstar out of college, but she's played on teams. She's become sort of a model, a face of the league, and so she has risen to this place where what she says really matters. And she said that she wanted to, as she said, protect women's sports, and she felt like she had an opinion on it because she's a professional women's athlete, and did not want women to be playing against, biological men, as she said. And that's really when it started off, because then protests and rallies in support of her followed to multiple games after that. And that's what gained the attraction of Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White, another former NBA player who sort of took up the crusade that Enes has as well.
So I think we got to say this, right? Because this has been ongoing, as I mentioned, for a few weeks now. There are no transgender women that play in the WNBA, full stop. And it's also obviously not the only women's sports league. But yet, as you mentioned, right, there's been protests, there's been folks wearing T-shirts, protests happening in and outside the game as well, right? Why has this become such a huge issue for the WNBA?
Yeah, this is something I actually wanted to talk to experts about a couple weeks ago when this was really bubbling to the surface. And I talked to the founding president of the Players Union of the league and a historian of the game as well. And they really said that you have to go back to the league's founding 30 years ago when ever since then, this has been a league where larger cultural conversations, kind of flashpoint issues, are being attached to the league.
So they've had kind of these tentpole activist type conversations inside the WNBA since its beginning.
Yes, I mean, you only have to go back about 5 years when some of the players were advocating for Black Lives Matter for the Atlanta Dream. The owner of that team came out essentially against it, Kelly Loeffler, the former Republican senator, and her players protested the owner of the team and eventually got her to sell the team. So this has been a league that is very comfortable sort of being speaking its mind, being activist about what they want, and the players have never been shy about that. And so what you're seeing now is, I think on both sides, you're seeing Sophie Cunningham voice her opinion, and then you're seeing players who said, no, this is not something that we need to turn against trans kids. You've seen coaches like Cheryl Reeve come out and say, we need to protect trans kids. So you're seeing it both outside of the league, but also inside the league. There's a little bit of a debate too.
So along with Enes Kanter Freedom, Royce White as well, both former NBA players, right? They're trying to provoke this response by saying we can actually get drafted by the WNBA. What is the league saying about this?
League sources told me too that these two players, Royce White and Enes Kanter Freedom, they are not eligible for the WNBA draft. They will not be able to play.
They're just trying to troll the issue in a way. It's obvious. Like they're just wanting to be a part of the conversation when they're not in the league and they're not eligible at all.
And that's what league sources have continued to say too, is they really felt like the league as a whole viewed this as a publicity stunt from these former players, trying to take something that's happening that doesn't even affect the league because there are no currently trans players in the league. This is something that isn't affecting the league, and yet there's attention being drawn to it for reasons that have nothing to do with basketball. That's really how the WNBA views this. And again, around the league, people you speak with, they will tell you that they realize that this is part of the double-edged sword of becoming a completely mainstream sport. The WNBA is always in our face now. And before, it was a little more shrouded. You had to seek out the league to really follow it and engage with it. Now it's everywhere.
Andrew Greif, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.